So now we have another really interesting subject. Don't worry, Sergio. With Bettina and Deloitte. So, and it's really important and a bit, philosophical. So ESG strategy versus space and defense. And because we see that no space technology are a bit supporting sustainability on Earth. We see also the work of the NASA on climate change and how they observe that. But anyhow, ESG is still, we still see if it fits with defense. That's the whole actual debate, if it still fits with defense and space. And when we see that we have to spend 600 billion per year in the Green Deal and 400 billion in defense until 2030. So the question is that they go together or they are still in opposition. So we have the pleasure to welcome Bettina from Deloitte, the sustainability leader from Deloitte Luxembourg, that she will really talk about this interlink between security, innovation and ESG strategy. Bettina, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, Oriane. I'll make this a lot smaller. Thank you, Oriane, for the introduction. And you already touched on half of the topics. I wanted to start off with something which is a little bit further away from defense. And I brought something to, well, just encourage a little bit the thinking behind it. So what you can see here, for everyone to see what it is, you may have all seen Jurassic Park. It's a little dinosaur. Why would I bring a little dinosaur to this presentation? Well, he has a special feature, and I hope it's going to work, because he can actually walk. Well, there, maybe he can, maybe he cannot. Now he should be, well, he was walking quite a bit outside. Well, he has a solar panel on his head. Maybe he's going to do it later on. Why am I bringing this? There's a good reason for that, because solar panels were invented by a Frenchman somewhere in the mid-1850s, roughly. Back then, it was not sustainable. So it was super expensive, very inefficient, and for quite a little bit more than 100 years, no one was really looking at solar panels, because the idea was great, but it was way too expensive. And it was only in the 1950s that the NASA actually picked up the solar panels, very inefficient still, and were making quite a lot of investment to make it work, because they had a couple of satellites which they wanted to have some energy source without cables that actually work. And they thought that this, if you develop it further, it could actually work. And they made it work in the 1953, actually. Today, solar panels are affordable. They're very efficient, and they're one of the biggest sources of renewable energy in our market and are very much supporting sustainability. So I could actually stop my presentation here, because you see the link between space, the use on Earth of what has been invented in space, and how it contributes to sustainability. So with that, there shouldn't be any more doubts. But I guess since I have still 27 minutes, we go into the topic with a little bit more granularity to look at how it can fit. What is space today? Because it has moved quite a bit from where it has been like 50 years ago. How it could fit within ESG, and whether it could also fit within sustainable investments, and which role Luxembourg could actually play in the sector. So I just move my dinosaur and wait for it to work. So where is space? Is the space industry ready to take off through sustainable investment? This is the big question. Can it actually fit into the framework of sustainable investment, or would it need to go a different way? There is a famous quote to say the most profound discovery of space exploration is Earth. Carl Sagan, he actually went on to say, well, we went to discover new worlds, but what we found was actually lots of useful things that we brought back to Earth and that helped us better understand our own Earth. And I think this is the main purpose of this presentation, to see how space can enable things here on our planet and actually create lots of good things. But what's important here to understand is that you need to move away from thinking of rockets and big satellites, but because today space is a lot more around data, the use of data for sustainability. So why are we talking about space today? And space in general, as of today, there's a huge growth in the sector. So as Oriane already mentioned in the intro, as of today, if you look at the space economy, you're talking about roughly $600 billion that are being invested in this sector. It's a massive sector that's existing. And if you look at the pie chart there on the right, the green and the blue part is actually the one that's coming from the private sector. Because many of you may think first about governments investing in space. That's the gray and the orange part, which really comes from government. The rest of it is private investments. There's a new economy that's actually growing. And if we already think that 600 billion as of today is a massive investment or is a massive sector, it's supposed to grow roughly until 2032, depending on the studies you're looking at, to about 1 trillion in 2032. So there's massive growth, private sector investment even more. So you're looking at about 30% growth. So it is quite an interesting target, but obviously you would need to make it fit. And so the question is around what is the connection with sustainability? I've touched on that briefly with the solar panels, and we'll have another slide on that later on. And I think then there's a third point on why space and why now, to say, is there an investment opportunity? There are lots of ESG funds. There was a dip earlier this year, but it's picking up again. They are growing and they are looking at growth opportunities. Now you could say that, well, you could also get that investment out of normal funds, but obviously if you have a 30% growth, people would want to participate, and the question is, can you make it fit into those funds, into those ESG funds, and can you make it fit within that framework? So what is the link between ESG and space? The E is probably the one that most of you feel is the closest, I guess. Looking at data that you can get from ESA, widely accessible to whoever would like to have a look at it. You can download it, you can analyze it, and you can use it to analyze climate change. You can look at ocean temperature, you can analyze hurricanes, you can look at weather in general. So it's really good data that you can use for the purpose of environmental aspects. You can look at how quickly forests grow, where they have been cut. All these aspects are possible because of satellites that are actually collecting this type of data. The S is maybe a little bit of a step further. There you mostly talk about connectivity. So you're connecting people that previously didn't have access to internet, for example. You are connecting them to the internet, and with that you allow them a different life. I'm not talking about the ones who then have access in order to go to the next Amazon platform to buy themselves something, but you're talking about remote areas. I've lived myself for a couple of years in Africa, and you have quite remote areas. People are very happy to get connectivity for educational purposes. So it allows kids to have access to teachers that may sit in different cities just to understand and to learn. You can also give them access to medicine because you have doctors that you can call and that can guide you in some treatments. So there is different aspects of it which all fall under the social aspect of ESG. And we had a panel, I think last year, where a Luxembourgish startup was using the data from the ESA to download it, analyze it, identify urban heat areas, to then advise cities in Luxembourg, but also all across Europe, to, in terms of urban planning, to improve cities, to improve the structure, to have more green space, to reduce the impact on health, because you have lots high impact. The hotter it gets in cities on health of the people that are living there. And so in that case, you would have the direct link between the data you get from the E that you can use for purposes of improving living conditions for the people in the cities. And I think it's a great example here. The G is even, well, that one is maybe a little bit further away to say, well, there's really a direct connection between space and the G. It requires lots of treaties. It's a space out there that is not that much regulated yet. And it requires for countries to actually collaborate. But on the other hand, it also provides lots of transparency. And it goes a little bit with a plus, which is a separate thing. So it enables sustainability by providing data. It serves kind of as an amplifier to verify data, to allow sustainability to grow, because people actually have some data points to really believe in it, especially in the times that we have today, where lots of people are challenging sustainability and climate change. Does it really exist? I think the fact to have substantial data and verifiable data helps a lot in enhancing the trust in the sector. So that's an overview. How does space and ESG actually go together? So I think there's a clear connection between the two. Now, can it also be a sustainable investment? And I think that's where maybe it becomes a little bit more challenging, whether it really fits together. I think you all know Article 6, 8, and 9. Those ones are pretty clear, the definitions. Where does space fit into those? You can look at Article 8. So you look at space companies that do contribute to social and environmental characteristics. You may think of OneWeb, you may think of SES, that are all providing that connectivity that I was just talking about. So they're providing many other services, but including in there, they're also serving a number of populations and people to get that access and actually enhance their lives. Article 9 is maybe a little bit more difficult. The firms that have a sustainability objective really at the core of their mission. There's one company that I would like to highlight here, but I could add some others. There's, for example, a Japanese company that looks at removing space debris. So you have the waste that remains in space from all the old satellites. It's actually causing quite a bit of trouble, because the more you have this waste floating around, the bigger is the risk for the new satellites that are up there to kind of crash. And there are companies that are on purpose trying to get up there and remove the debris in order to make sure that for the future there's less of a risk for the other satellites. Those ones would typically fit in quite nicely into the Article 9 from an SFDR perspective. So then there's still a lot of challenges, and you're going to see that there's a very small portion as of today of sustainability funds that actually invest in space. So some of the reasons are the ones that you see there on the right. What are some of those reasons? It's, well, in EU taxonomy, there's no category. So it's clearly something that has been missed. They will probably review it. I think it would enhance it, but I think it shouldn't stop investments either. DNSH principle is another one. So you can say that it's great to have data coming from the satellites, and you're using that data, and it has actually lots of good elements in it. But how are you getting the data, and how are you getting the satellites up there? It's because you have those huge rockets. They are actually producing lots of emissions when they are launched. And so making that fit in your strategy to say, well, you benefit on the one side, but on the other side, you have that issue that you're creating a lot more emissions up front, is the question of how you can actually handle that. And there's the dual use topic that Oriane just mentioned before. Many people actually connect immediately space and defense. It's like as if the two have to go together. It's always space and defense. Maybe in that case, I would like to, unfortunately, I couldn't add the photo anymore to this presentation, but there's an advert from Chrysler from the 1960s where they say, look, this is where our know-how is used. And they're basically promoting a wide range of products where they say, look, this is where we have contributed with our know-how. And they show cars, they show motorcycles, they show airplanes, vessels, but then they also show tanks on the one side and they show rockets. And I think it's a little bit the issue that we have in many aspects, like things are developed in one place, but they're also used somewhere else. And that's the principle of dual use. So yes, you can use your data to monitor how the forests are growing, but you could also use that same data to monitor your borders, or to look at who else is coming closer to your borders. I think there are many aspects. While you look at Starlink, what he can do with satellites. He can provide connectivity, but at the same time, he can also allow drones to fly. So there are many, many aspects where we say, yes, it's dual use, and for space, people are a lot more hesitant than for other areas. Amazon is doing the same. You have not mentioning one company, but you have lots of tech companies out there that actually do things that are close to it, but no one actually has a doubt. Lots of technology companies in general, also manufacturing entities, they produce pieces that are contributing to something that can be used later on for defense purposes. Typically, people don't think about it except for space. So there is a way of looking at it, and I think it's important to take a look at it, to look at the governance of how you can supervise this type of investment. You have some possibilities to also look at, similar to the use of proceeds for bonds, to say, well, I'm investing here and I'm only investing in this type of segment. But obviously you cannot avoid that knowledge that has been gained in one area is going to be used in a different area. So I think there's lots of hesitation, there's lots of space where people don't know, and this is creating maybe some of this doubt around space and defense, the fact that it is always mentioned together. But I think there are many other industries where we have less hesitation that are contributing to defense in a similar way as space. So it's important to monitor, it's important to have the governance, but it's maybe not a topic that should stop investors immediately from the aspect of an investment in space. What I mentioned before is what is the gap and where is the opportunity? So why am I here? I'm talking about 600 billion out there, which has a big growth. As of today, there are less than 5% of ESG funds that are investing in space. Reasons are all the ones that I've mentioned before. So it's the perception gap. You have this view that space and defense always go together. You're thinking of high tech, you're thinking of the rockets which are polluting the air. But you also have a time horizon gap. So if you look at an investment in space, very often those investments are taking between 7 and 10 years to actually become profitable. If you look at funds, that's way too long in terms of what the funds are actually looking at. So there's some kind of a gap that needs to be bridged to make it actually viable for a fund, Article 9 fund, that would want to invest in space, to say, well, actually that return needs to come in quicker, or you need to structure the fund in a different way to make it actually viable. Taxonomy and data, I think we've touched on that. So why Luxembourg? Because I mean, the purpose here is to talk not about a random topic. Why are we talking about Luxembourg? And Luxembourg in this structure has a very unique place because it has two strengths, two very separate areas where Luxembourg has invested for many, many years, and it could actually now pay off to bring the two together. The one is the financial hub that you see on the left. So it's a global hub for cross-border funds, which all of you know, and every year we see how that market is growing. But we're also looking at new opportunities in that area. Luxembourg has been a pioneer when it comes to green investments. Looking at the green stock exchange was one of the first. You have lots of certifications here. I think there are many areas where Luxembourg was pretty keen to actually move quicker than some others. Also regulatory credibility, I think we moved a lot quicker on SFDR than some other countries. So the framework is actually there. So I think this one is a good start. And then Luxembourg has shown something else in the past, that wherever there was opportunity, they also were able to grab it. Looking at when they put in place REIF or LTIF, it's always like you see an opportunity, you see that the current structures are not perfectly working, but Luxembourg was able to capture that opportunity and actually find a way to use it. So that's the finance side, and there's lots of skills in that. There's the past experience where you can say, this is what we've already done, and there's probably something that we've learned from it. There are lots of capabilities in the market. And then on the other side, Luxembourg has invested for many, many years in the space sector. And I think many people have been smiling about that for many years. I think by now it actually pays off. Most recent example is probably the Space Hub that's going to be created by the government and a number of private sector investors in Kokelscheuer. So they are going to attract a number of companies from the space sector to actually come together, invest there, and develop those skills further. And I think the moment you have a couple of companies there, you will attract also a number of startups. So this one is the other side. You have the Luxembourg Space Agency that has been put in place about 20 years ago. You have the Luxembourg Space Law, where Luxembourg was one of the first countries to have that in place. So you have the skills on space on the one side, you have the skills on the financial sector on the other. And I think now the next step would be to actually take one step further and say we are combining the two to make it an attractive investment for investors. And this one has a question mark. I think it's an important point to say this one has a question mark. So is this something that Luxembourg could fill by 2030 to say this could be a viable investment? And if we do it today and we think about how to do it, that this could create something new and a new opportunity also for the financial sector. Bringing together also players like the EIB, EIF that are already investing in space in Luxembourg to bring all of them around one table and say, look, this is something that we really believe in. It's a huge sector, and let's try and position Luxembourg as one of the hubs in this sector to make it grow, which has a couple of different elements. So it can be the investment in space companies. I think that's the one, and we've been talking about that quite a bit. It also has the use of that data that comes from it. I think that's one step behind it. There is lots of data, there's lots of opportunities, and ESG needs that data also to be credible in the future. So how can you attract more of those startups that I was talking about to look at the data, capture it, and find the opportunity in that data to further take ESG to the next level, support sustainability investments, support impact investments, and provide the data to make it measurable. And I think on the last area, to contribute to a regulatory framework that where we have the skills, we've done it already, but provide a regulatory framework that can mitigate some of the challenges that you may have seen earlier on one of the slides. This is a quote from the European Space Agency. Every euro invested in space returns 10 in innovation on Earth. You may think about the solar panel that has probably created more than 10 euros per euro invested. There are many investments that you may have seen that have started in space that are now part of our everyday life. And it is something that we should probably consider going forward. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Any questions, Bettina?
Otherwise, happy to, since I think we are running a little late.
Thank you, Oriane. I just wanted to give kudos for an excellent presentation. There's a lot of things that I think we should discuss, but that will be off stage. But excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and happy to discuss.
Any other question before moving on? Thank you, Bettina.
Thank you. And I'll still be around, so happy to also discuss with some others.